Thank you for tuning in to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast, where we discuss the latest news, rumors, and games of the NFL and college football. As always, I'm Jeremiah.
Hey, I'm Anthony.
And we have a lot to get to today, Anthony. We got a little bit of some breaking news this morning. The New York Giants signed Brandon Marshall to a 2-year deal that is worth $12 million. And this was probably the biggest move of free agency so far. Well, you know what? This is the time when a lot of teams can, talk to agents, and teams can't. Well, players can't legitimately sign with teams until tomorrow, I believe.
Right. Today is like a legalized tampering kind of day for them, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. So the free agency period doesn't start tomorrow, but since Brandon Marshall did get released, I think that kind of makes it okay for Marshall to sign within their team, right? Am I right about that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. Well, this is the biggest free agent deal so far. Well, this is the first one with the biggest name.
Yeah.
And we got a lot of big names on the market, but Marshall, he is staying in New York, so he doesn't have to move. But he is playing probably with the best quarterback he has played with. If you look at the quarterbacks that Brandon Marshall has played in his career, Eli Manning is no doubt probably the best one.
Yeah, because you think. So he started off with Jay Cutler. Then he went to Miami, and he was Chad Henne, and I think he had a year of Ryan Tannehill. And then he went to Chicago, again, Jay Cutler. And then Ryan Fitzpatrick, Geno Smith. Yeah, Eli's by far probably the best quarterback he's played for. Cutler's not bad, but he's not – Eli's going to go to the Hall of Fame, which people don't want to, admit that he will. He's a Manning. That part helps enough as it is, and he's got 2 rings. He's going to the Hall of Fame. And now you got the Giants set up with him, meaning Brandon Marshall. You have Odell Beckham Jr., and you even have Sterling Shepard as a third wide receiver on the team. Wide receiver-wise, passing-wise, they're set. Running back, different thing. But you have those 3 guys for Eli Manning, and you got to assume Eli's going to, be throwing it all around for somewhere probably around 5,000 yards.
Yeah, and I think people forget that Sterling Shepard is a serviceable receiver at number 3.
Well, yeah, he's the third string,
yeah,
exactly.
So I think people forgot about that as well. He actually started off 2016 pretty hot and then kind of slowed down as the year went on. But, he was only a rookie, and I think he was a second rounder, so he's going to get better. But with Brandon Marshall coming to the Giants here, this really makes them, I think it makes them a top 5 offense, potentially. And I do think that they will be. I'm surprised they haven't had any talks with Adrian Peterson's agent about possibly coming.
Well, he's allegedly, according to, I think it was his dad, they have this report out, where it's between the Seahawks and the Raiders for Adrian Peterson, which I didn't even think about the Seahawks. I mean, the Seahawks kind of make sense because their running game was kind of in flux last year. But, yeah, it's those are the 2 teams, and for him, I guess the Patriots are always kind of in the mix with that too. But, yeah, Peterson, if you brought him on there, I mean, you're hoping that Peterson can be that guy. And Brandon Marshall, the reason you're assuming he had a bad year last year was because the quarterbacks were so bad. So you're bringing in a couple of older players, great players, borderline Hall of Famer for Brandon Marshall, certain Hall of Famer for Adrian Peterson. With his move, it's an interesting game because this is the first big name, right? Although some of the big names that we say are out there aren't necessarily out there yet, like a Tony Romo or Jimmy Garoppolo. They're not exactly out there. We're just assuming they're going to be out there. But this is the one, and this wasn't a big money move. We haven't, seen yet the why did you give this man this much money contract yet?
Yeah, they only signed him for $12 million over 2 years. That's $6 million per year.
Yeah,
that's not a lot for a name like Brandon Marshall. But I think he's the type of guy that wants to earn money. I think he's someone that knows kind of his place right now in the league. He knows that he wasn't productive last year. He knows that he didn't play like a top wideout. So I think this is a prove-it year for him. And with playing alongside OBJ and Eli Manning, his numbers are going to increase. Remember, he's only 59 receptions shy of 1,000 for his career. So he's definitely going to get that. But I do think that his numbers will improve. I do think that this is a potentially scary offense to look at on paper now.
Even if he doesn't have the year that you want him to have, like even if he doesn't get that 1,500-yard mark, which I don't think he will because Odell's going to get a lot of those yards, he's a replacement for Victor Cruz, right? Victor Cruz last year basically had 39 receptions for 586 and a touchdown. Marshall had 59 for 788 and 3 touchdowns. So even if his production is the same as it was last year, that's an upgrade from what Victor Cruz was. And Victor Cruz was set to make $5.3 million. He's making $6 million. Brandon Marshall, so basically paying $700,000 for a better wide receiver, because Victor Cruz, as great as he was when he broke into the league in 2011 with 1,500 yards, has been that guy by injury or Odell Beckham coming in or whatever. He hasn't been the same kind of productive as he was when he first got into the league. But now you have Marshall over there to basically take the reins for that. And even if Marshall only does what he did last year, he's going to get that 1,000 catches. He's going to get the kind of production that you wanted, from him as the second wide receiver on a team.
Yeah, and I do think some people forget that Brandon Marshall was just 2 years ago. 2 years ago, Brandon Marshall had his best career numbers.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this move helps out Odell Beckham so much. Odell Beckham has been scrutinized since he came into the league. He's overrated. He shouldn't be going on the boat trip to Miami before a playoff game. I do think that this will help out Odell Beckham because he finally has help on the outside.
Not only that, but yes. Also, yes. Also, Brandon Marshall is someone we like to yell at too. I don't say we in the sense of I like to, because you know me, I don't really care. Do what you want to do. But as much as we yell at Odell Beckham Jr. about you shouldn't go on a boat, you should be in the playbook the whole time, study kind of thing like that. We yell at Brandon Marshall a lot too, or at least we used to. And if Marshall does something where he kind of gets into it with his teammates, we're going to yell at him. That kind of takes some of the, anger and whatever, bile that we have towards Odell Beckham, and it kind of shifts it over to Brandon Marshall. So even Odell Beckham's going to be like, hey, thank you. The media's yelling at you today and not me. All right, this is a good day.
That's another way to put it. But from a football perspective, I was talking about
I know that point, that too. Yeah, it's definitely going to help him out because you have to cover Brandon Marshall. For as bad as he was last year, only catching 59 passes out of the 128 that was thrown to him, before that, he was pretty sure-handed as far as if you threw it to him, he's going to catch the ball, kind of in that whole Anquan Bolden kind of role, right? Kind of in the whole thing of if you throw it in the vicinity of him, he's going to either catch the ball or do all he can to catch. He was pretty reliable in that aspect. So having him there, and we've seen what Odell Beckham can do when he catches the ball, the whole basically glue almost on his hands, getting it with one hand every single time. You have two pretty sure-handed receivers for Eli to throw to.
Yeah, and Brandon Marshall is just 2 years removed from his career year, in receptions, receiving yards, and touchdowns. I do think that if Brandon Marshall has even 80% of those numbers, or maybe even 60%, this is a good signing.
If he can get 1,000 yards, it's worth it.
I do think he will have a chance to get 1,000 yards. He's not going to get a 1,502 again because I do think Odell Beckham's going to be the leading guy. He is the number one guy there. I do think he has a chance to get more than 10 touchdowns, though, because, he is a big target in the red zone.
Right.
So I do think he has a chance for that aspect. 109 catches, though, more than 100 receptions, I don't know. That might be a lot.
No, he's not good. What you basically hope for him to do is get somewhere around 65 to 70 catches for about 1,000 to 1,100 yards and about 6, 7, 8 touchdowns. That, if he can do something in that range or whatever, then it's worth it, right? Then it's worth the $6 million that you gave to him and being the number 2 receiver to basically take some of the pressure off of Odell Beckham, just basically make it not so, everyone's double teaming him all the time. And he still gets his yards. Don't get me wrong. Beckham will still get his yards. But this at least makes so the defense has to be okay, yeah, watch him too. Don't leave him one-on-one because that's not going to go well. Okay, we have to send somebody over to him. Basically make it so you have to respect Brandon Marshall will help out Beckham a lot.
And I do think something that we haven't really talked about a lot is Eli Manning is getting older as well. So he has to get as much help, to this team as well. Brandon Marshall will help out Eli Manning, and Eli Manning should help out Brandon Marshall you got to get all the help to Eli Manning. I think he's hitting to the back end of his career. Remember, I think he's, 36? Going
38,
to 30,
I think.
Yeah, 38. He's not going to get any younger.
Yeah.
And he probably wants to win one more Super Bowl because isn't he tied with his brother?
He is tied with his brother.
There you go. So he wants to win one more to beat his brother. He so
badly wants to get one more.
He wants to get one more to beat Peyton, his brother.
Oh, he is 36, by the way, Eli.
So he's 36. He's about to head into the back end of his career. So,
well, you look at the thing that he's had, right? The Eli Manning career, right? He kind of had the thing where he had the 2 Super Bowls and everyone was kind of like, wow, I can't believe he has more rings than his brother. And then Peyton ended up getting the second ring to balance everything out. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. So they both got 2, and Peyton Manning has all the records. So we're going to now totally, okay, Peyton's totally better. There's no discussion, whatever. Eli Manning, for as good as he's been recently, like before Beckham got there, wasn't doing the same kind of a thing, right? He was basically before that under 60%. For the 2 years before that, right? The last 3 years, he's over 60%, basically a 63% completion percentage over those last 3 years, basically 4,300 yards average every single year, throwing the ball and, about 30 to 35 touchdowns every year. But before that, he was getting 18 touchdowns with 27 interceptions the year before that, not even throwing for 4,000 yards, not even 60% completion. The point is, he wasn't productive like you would hope he was before Odell Beckham Jr. got there. Odell kind of helped the math with Eli basically get his numbers up and make everything look like a quarterback should look, and having Marshall on there can only help that out a little bit more.
Yeah, so I do think that this move helps out Eli Manning just as it helps with Odell Beckham Jr. And I do think they will be in the market for a running back.
Something, yeah.
Whether that's Adrian Peterson, Jamal Charles, or getting one in the draft. This is a very deep draft class at running backs this year.
Right.
So it remains to be seen what the Giants will do. I don't think they're done because remember last season the Giants, they made splashes on free agency in the defensive side of the ball, and it worked out pretty well for them. Mm-hmm. Their defense improved dramatically. So I don't think they're done. I do think they're going to make some more splashy moves before the draft.
And with all that being said, like you just say, like, oh, well, it looks like Adrian Peterson's going to go to either the Seahawks or the Raiders. I mean, some team could go over to Peterson tomorrow and just be like, all right, look, whatever, what they offer you, yeah, raise that by $2 million. It totally could change on a dime. The Giants could look at everything and be like, I mean, we're basically a wide receiver in here, we're running back away. All right, well, in the GM's basically like, all right, whatever, just give Peterson that extra $1 million or $2 million. Like, you could totally change their mind and go to Peterson, and Peterson's like, all right, cool, so I'll do that. Things could change like that.
Yeah, so it remains to be seen what the Giants do before the draft because, I don't think they're done in free agency. I think they're going to make another huge splash. Just wait on it, guys. Just wait on it. All right, bro. We're going to take our first break, and we're going to discuss Joe Mixon, one of the running backs in this year's draft class. He didn't get to participate in the combine, but he did meet with some teams before his pro day, and we will discuss that when we get back to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to Going to Me Concepts Football Podcast. And Joe Mixon, he didn't get a chance to participate at the NFL scouting combine this weekend because due to his assault charge, which I think he was guilty. No, he wasn't guilty of it, but
it's on video for everyone to see.
It made such huge headlines this past fall, so a lot of people knew about Joe Mixon because of that. And that was probably the reasoning why the NFL didn't invite Joe Mixon. But, no, Joe Mixon had a chance to talk to teams on Tuesday night prior to his pro day today, which he ran a 4.43 40-yard dash time. So that was a time that I expected him to run around that range. But the teams that he met with were the Cleveland Browns, the Cincinnati Bengals, the Detroit Lions, and the New Orleans Saints. 4 teams that he met with Tuesday night. This is the first time that Mixon can meet with teams. And I do think that he is a first-round talent, but he's not going to get drafted in the first round. He is going to be, I think he's going to be a strong second-round pick. He can possibly fall into the third round, maybe. But I do think that Joe Mixon has a lot of talent. I do think he has too much talent to not be in the NFL, but I do think with his pass, it's going to scare a lot of teams away. It's going to scare a lot of teams away as well. And I do think that there would be potentially maybe a PR backlash to Joe Mixon going to a team, but Joe Mixon's going to be in the NFL. I don't have any doubt about it in my mind. And there was a lot of disappointment with Joe Mixon not being at the combine. You got Lions general manager Bob Quinn saying, he was disappointed because he wasn't able to evaluate Mixon. And remember, the Lions do need a running back.
Right.
D.D. Westbrook, his former teammate at Oklahoma, said that it's a shame that he wasn't there. So when you put all this into perspective, I still think Joe Mixon, he had to have a very important pro day. And it looks like he did with his 4.43 40-yard dash time. But I do think that when you look at a lot of teams, all these teams I met with, they need running backs. There's a lot of teams that need running backs. Sure, it's a quarterback-driven league, but I do think a running back is an important part of the position. I think the reason why I say that is because look at the Super Bowl this year. Look at the Super Bowl. I do think if the Falcons actually stuck to the game plan of running the football, they would have won that game, no doubt. So I do think when you have a lead, and just look at what Ezekiel Elliott did with the Cowboys this year. He kind of rejuvenated that position a little bit. I do think that we can perhaps see a rejuvenation of the position this year because we're going to have guys like Leonard Fournette. We're going to have like Dalvin Cook get drafted in the first round. They can be stars by the end of 2017. So Joe Mixon, I think he's going to go to the league, but I don't know when he would get drafted, though. It's just so tough to speculate because of his past.
So there's 2 things, right? There's 2 things that you basically have to have if you're Mixon, right? There's 2 things. One, contrition. Some way of basically telling the public, look, I understand this video's out. I can't do anything about that video being out, but I want you to know that, this will never happen again, and I'm very sorry about what had happened, right? And I'm working towards being a better person, da-da-da. You basically have to make the public believe that. But then you also have to have production, right? Because in 2 other instances, call it Ray Rice and Greg Hardy, they had one but not the other. Ray Rice seemed super contrite, super sorry about what he did. His talent just wasn't good enough for him to get back in the NFL, and now it's been a handful of years since then. There's no way he's coming back. Greg Hardy, on the other hand, before all of this happened and everything transpired and we knew what he did, he was a really good defensive end getting a bunch of sacks. Then he played one game, they had to sit out the rest of the year. Then he came back and had 7 sacks. Still productive enough to be an NFL player, but that dude didn't care at all, man. It was one thing where it was just dude, just give us a little bit of I'm sorry, just a little tiny apology. And he was just nope, not going to say it, don't care, fight me, I'll fight you back, kind of thing like that. And at a certain point, they were just look, man, I understand you're still talented, but we cannot have this toxicity around us, man. You have to go. And this is the Cowboys and Jerry Jones doesn't care about anything as far as publicity and bad publicity goes. He'll do it over and over and over again. He's still not letting go of Tony Romo because he loves him so much. He is trying to hold on to that. He doesn't care about the media swarming around him, but they had to get rid of Hardy because it's just look, man, you got to be a little bit more sad about what you did. Otherwise, we can't keep you. So with Mixon, he's so far done the whole I'm sorry route, right? Which is good, which is nice, which is a way of starting off. Because let's be honest. Like, do you know if he's sorry? Do I know if he's sorry? Does anybody know if he's sorry? No. Nobody has any idea what he actually feels, right? You just have to go on what you say and what you do, right? Like I said, Ray Rice seemed like he was sorry. Michael Vick seemed like he was sorry. Now there were people still picketing outside of Pittsburgh and outside of Philadelphia when he got there, basically yelling at him for what he did, and that was never going to change. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that any of this will go away with Joe Mixon. He will deal with this for the rest of his playing career. As long as he is still a high-profile player, he will get this, right? Because even if he is the number one wide receiver or number one running back on a bad team, that's still enough fame for you to merit basically getting yelled at all the time and having the video, basically plastered up every single time you go somewhere.
Yeah, and I do think you kind of alluded to the differences between Joe Mixon and the guys that have similar past, like Greg Hardy. Greg Hardy, they didn't care. He never said sorry.
No.
And he's been one of the biggest D-bags in the league ever since then. And he still is. And with Ray Rice, we all know how that went. And he wasn't let back into the league.
No.
And even though he was at the tail end of his career, if that never happened, I do think he would at least have one more year on the team. But Ray Rice did... he was truly sorry. He actually wanted to be a spokesman for, against domestic violence and all that. So that's the thing that, he got a little bit more respect for that. But, people can't forget that video. With Joe Mixon, we saw this video. And we talked about this like in the fall when this video came out, and it was brutal. It came out, I think he was like a freshman when this happened in 2014. He did receive a misdemeanor assault charge, but accepted a plea deal that included 1 year probation, counseling, and 100 years of community service.
Hours.
100 hours. What did I say?
Years.
Oh, wow. He won't even be alive.
He got all the community
counseling
service.
and 100 hours of community service. And, he was also suspended for 2014. And, even though he wasn't convicted of a crime or anything, the NFL instituted a new rule this year that bans players from the combine if they have misdemeanor or felony convictions, including domestic violence. Even though Mixon doesn't fall as a convict, this will look bad on the NFL. They want to move away from this domestic violence type of thing. They don't want to be known for that because it gives them bad PR. And, Roger Goodell, he's all about branding the league in a good way, and that doesn't brand the league at all. But as far as Joe Mixon, the football player, goes, I do think that, this is going to be on him throughout his career. I do agree with that. Even if he becomes like, if he has like a career like Adrian Peterson, this is still going to haunt him to the day till he retires. It's just a matter of, can he give back to the community? Can he be a good role model for kids in that community? It's just all it is. It's just how he presents himself outside the field. I just think that's all it's going to come down to. If he is a productive player, then that's even a bigger thing for whichever team decides to draft him in April.
Yeah, and there's the thing. Like it's a weird thing with Mixon, right? Because Mixon. I mean, we saw last year how good he can be, right, with Oklahoma. Like, everything considered, like, and the stuff with Mixon, like, we didn't even know about how bad it was until the video came out, right? Because we don't tend to care, as cynical as this is to say, like, we don't generally care as much about the crime unless there's actually some evidence to go along with it, right? Because we didn't know anything about Tyreek Hill publicly. Like, I'm not talking about, like, scouts or anything else. Like, us public, like, we didn't know anything about Tyreek Hill and how bad his stuff was until Tyreek Hill started doing some stuff, and everyone was kind of pointing out, like, hey, also, look what he did. Look in the past and the domestic violence stuff that he did with a pregnant, I think it's either wife or girlfriend, in the past. Like, take a look at that, too. And then all of a sudden we started to care about that. And with Mixon, nothing was a story until basically the video emerged, and it was just like, oh, wow, okay. And then you basically wanted him banned from ever working ever again in any kind of, sport or career or anything else like that. with Mixon, he had, almost 1,300 yards and 10 touchdowns, and he's, a big enough running back, 6'1", 226, like enough of a dude to play in the league for a decent amount of time. Is he Leonard Fournette, where he's this big, massive, hulking dude? No. But you don't necessarily have to be that. And with Mixon, he is someone that if he can keep up this talent, then I'm not saying it goes away because I don't think it ever goes away.
No,
but I think
it would never go away.
But I think it lessens it to a certain degree because you have the situation where all you have to do is basically make us believe that you are sorry for it and atoning for it. And I don't want to say apologize every single time because I don't know when basically we kind of give you some leeway on it because we've never seen this situation, right? We have never seen in the NFL someone who is a domestic abuser in this climate because Brandon Marshall was. Brandon Marshall has stuff in his past.
Yeah, and people forget about that, yeah.
But that was also before we cared about the stuff, as cynical as it is to say, it's before we cared about the stuff. He had it, but he's since then gotten medication for bipolar disorder and stuff like that. He's tried to curb it as well. But like I said, whether it was Ray Rice or Greg Hardy, we've never seen this kind of situation. Greg Hardy, we saw him play and everyone hated him, but he didn't care. If Mixon cares and tries to get through this, that's a totally different scenario because this isn't dogfighting, right? This isn't a, DUI manslaughter with Dante Stallworth back in the day with the Patriots. This isn't that. This is something totally different that hits you in a certain place like dogfighting did. But, this has to do with women. So it's going to be interesting to see how the media at large, if he has a good season and if he seems like he cares that he wants to wants to be a better person, how the public reacts to him at that point.
Yeah, and, you kind of touched on it a little bit, with, Michael Vick and saying sorry about the dogfighting. And when he came back from prison, when he was released, signed with the Philadelphia Eagles, and there was a lot of protesters outside Lincoln Bank Memorial Stadium. And I think once Michael Vick became a productive player and an MVP candidate in 2010, I think people kind of slowly forgave him, but kind of not forgave him in a way. They kind of forgot about it because he became productive for the Eagles, and he got them to the playoffs that year. He had an incredible season. He probably had one of the best performances from a quarterback I've seen that year against the Washington Redskins when he threw for 500 yards and ran for 100. I don't remember the exact numbers, but that was the best performance I've seen and a quarterback in the past, 10 to 15 years. Well, in my lifetime.
We forgive you if you're great. But then once you're not great, then we yell at you again.
That's the thing. But I'm not saying that's okay.
No, I'm not saying it's okay. But hell, we've done that with Cam Newton. Cam Newton doesn't have anything in his past outside of stealing laptops and trying to get into Auburn, getting paid to do that kind of stuff, right? That's all that he has on his resume, but we don't like Cam Newton. So basically, we let him live when he had the MVP season and make it to the Super Bowl. And then the next year he had a bad year, and all of a sudden now we're going to yell at him, talk about how he's not as good as, before, overrated or whatever. If we don't like you, we will find ways to yell at you. And with Mixon, we don't like him right now for obvious and legitimate reasons, but it'll be interesting to see if that kind of flares up again, even if he's contrite and has a good season, or if he has a bad season, if we kind of yell at him again. It'll be interesting to see how this all goes.
Yeah, so getting back to Joe Mixon here, he did meet with 4 teams. The Browns, the Bengals, the Lions, the Saints. Those are all teams that need running backs. Even though the Saints have Mark Ingram, he's injury prone.
Sure.
The Lions had trouble running the football. The Bengals, they had injuries to Giovanni Bernard, Jeremy Hill.
Right.
Cleveland, they can use anybody there.
They won't take everybody except for a left tackle. That's the only thing they won't take. Even a wide receiver, because as good as Pryor was, is you got a wide receiver, we'll take him too.
They have Corey Coleman.
That's fine. He got hurt.
Round. Yeah, and they could potentially have Josh Gordon coming back, but we already talked about that a week ago.
Don't hold your breath on that.
Yeah. But getting back to Joe Mixon here, I do think that he will be an NFL player. Will he be a productive rookie? We won't know until he steps on the field. But he will be on the team. Will he be a day 2 pick? Because he's not going in the first round. There's way too much talent. There's way too many defensive backs this year.
defensive backs. There's quarterbacks that you're going to take high. There's other running backs like McCaffrey and Fournette and them. There's going to be taken and also the fact of you kind of want the open box special, right? You want the thing, if you've ever seen the movie Big Daddy, you throw the can on the floor, he helps his price a little bit out. Like, you want the kind of dented product that you can get for cheaper because it's not as valuable because of, other situations, right? You want that kind of a thing with him, and if he's a second-round pick, he's a lot cheaper than a first-round pick.
Mm-hmm. So I do think he will definitely be a day 2, maybe day 3 pick. If he's a day 3 pick, my gosh, that's a steal.
Sure.
But I do think, Alvin Kamara from Tennessee can go before him. This is just a deep running back class.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think he will be a late second-rounder, maybe early third, but he will get drafted. I can't see Joe Mixon getting undrafted. He's probably the 4th or 5th best running back in this class, and it's a deep draft class this year.
Right.
Probably one of the best I've ever seen. Well, it remains to be seen what will happen with Joe Mixon in the draft. Okay, well, we're going to take our last break, and we're going to talk about Mike Glennon, a backup quarterback. That's right, we're going to talk about backup quarterback Mike Glennon when we get back to Going to Media Concepts Football Podcast.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red-hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's GSMCpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
And welcome back to Going to Media Concepts Football Podcast. And before the break, I did say we are going to talk about Mike Glennon, who is a backup, but he is looking to be a starter as he is a free agent. The Buccaneers actually offered Mr. Glennon a contract that would have made him the highest paid backup in the NFL, but he declined and he decided he wants to go to free agency to be a starting quarterback. And there's reports that he might get a deal in the $14 to $15 million range. And there is a lot of teams out there that need a quarterback. He becomes literally the hottest free agent on the market because, Kirk Cousins, he's still with the Washington Redskins. Jimmy Garoppolo, still with the Patriots. Tony Romo, he will probably be the likeliest free agent of the two I just mentioned, but he is still with the Cowboys. Mike Glennon, I actually do like his type of play. I think his type of style could be really good on some teams. But when he was a starter, he didn't win a lot of games. He hasn't completed more than 60% of his passes. And he does have good numbers. He does have 30 touchdowns in his career compared to 15 interceptions. But, he is a backup for a reason. And I do think that I kind of like the way that he kind of declined to be paid the highest backup quarterback because, kind of says something to me. Kind of says that he's not satisfied with being a backup. He's only 27. So he's still young enough to be a starter, and I do think he can. He to me, Mike Glennon is the perfect stopgap quarterback. I actually like his style for the 49ers, but the 49ers said they're not interested in Mike Glennon. I kind of like his style for the Bears. It looks like that the Bears and Mike Glennon could happen. So I do think that he could fit a style with the quarterback needy teams, but he's not any means a franchise guy. He's just not. His game is more of the strong arm. He's a drop back type of passer. He fits the mold of the traditional drop back passer. He is a deep thrower. He does have that big arm. He was the perfect fit for Greg Schiano's offense. But, when Greg Schiano left, Mike Glennon he didn't fit the new scheme when Greg Schiano left. He didn't fit the West Coast system. But he did really well as a rookie. He started 13 games. He threw for 19 touchdowns. Only had 9 picks. So he had a pretty good, solid rookie year. And, of course, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they did draft Jameis Winston at number 1. And there was a reason why he was the number 1 pick is because the Bucs were so bad the year before. And that was the last year that Glennon started in 2014. So I do think that Mike Glennon is the perfect stopgap quarterback no matter where he goes as a starter.
Look, he could be a McCown brother. He can be a Matt Schaub. He can be a Brian Hoyer. He can be one of those dudes. That's fine. I'm not saying he can't be someone that you do that with. What I'm saying is he is also, if you want to call him a stopgap, he's allegedly going to make $15 million as a stopgap. And here's the problem.
I don't think he's going to get a lot of years on his contract, though.
Okay, that's fine, but also $15 million. That's a lot of money, and that's basically the low end of a starting quarterback, right? The problem with it is, let's say he goes to the Bears, right? The Bears need a quarterback because Jay Cutler is gone and they don't have a quarterback, and, they need to figure out what to do. If you pay him $15 million, you're going to do that for 2 or 3 years, right? You're not going to do that for 5 years. You're going to do it for 2 or 3. And if you do that, then you run into the problem of, okay, so clearly then you're not going to take a quarterback in the first round, right? You're not going to take Trubisky, you're not going to take Watson, you're not going to take people like that. Fine. The problem is the next year's draft looks like it's going to be a lot better for quarterbacks, right? Be it Josh Rosen, Sam Darnold, Jake Browning, whoever, right? You're going to have these quarterbacks that are at least, from...
Those are all Pac-12 guys you just mentioned, by the way.
Right. And also people that we saw last year do pretty well. Maybe not Rosen. Rosen kind of struggled a little bit with UCLA, but we saw how good Sam Darnold was, and then Jake Browning for the first, 10, 12 games of the season was the MVP of the league.
I think Sam Darnold's as a true sophomore next year, I think.
Is he a true sophomore?
I think he's 2 years away. I don't know. Look that up. But I do know Jake Browning is a junior next year. So.
Yeah. So, you have the situation where you have better quarterbacks, is my point, next year. And if that is the case, if you have the better quarterbacks, coming next year, are you going to get $15 million to a guy that if, you're bad again next year? Because it's not like just because you get Mike Glennon, now you're going to be a playoff team. He was a starter and didn't, win. He was 4-9 when he was a starter his rookie year as a third-round pick. And then after that, you decided to go with Jameis Winston. And I totally get that part. That's fine because it's Jameis Winston, and he was kind of one of those clear-cut number 1 overall picks that, kind of Andrew Luck style. But... are you going to give $15 million and then just kind of totally go away from it? What exactly are you going to do with that? It's just a weird thing for me of not knowing exactly what you're doing if you're going to give this much to a guy who you don't even consider as the starter for a long time. You consider him a stopgap, but you're going to give this much money to him? That just seems kind of weird.
Yeah, and I know where you're coming from, but I do think that he is going to make something around that range.
Well, I'm not saying he's not going to. I'm just saying for certain teams, I don't understand what you're doing. If you're the Niners, fine, I totally get it because you're, kind of needing of everything and you want to get a quarterback because the Niners just signed Pierre Garçon, or at least, in talks to sign him, or it's not, it can't be official until tomorrow, but it looks like you're going to sign Garçon, which is kind of the thing, right? Because you got situation where you get Shanahan, who played in Washington for a little bit with Pierre Garçon, so now you kind of bring your guys that over to your new job. I get that part of it, but for Glennon, it's not like he was setting the world on fire. And name me a backup quarterback who was benched who has gone to another team and done well.
Pretty soon, Tony Romo.
No.
No, but you're talking about in general, yeah.
I'm talking about
there's a reason why
he was benched because of injury and Kip on the bench. I'm talking about a dude that was just oh yeah, you're no good. We're benching you.
Okay, so no, not injuries aside. So you can't count Alex Smith in that type of category. And there's a reason why Mike Glennon is a backup. He he had okay stats, but he didn't win games.
Right, and even if Alex Smith is your ceiling, that's not a high ceiling.
It's not. It's really not. And, the Chiefs have reportedly been interested in Tony Romo, so that's part of the reason why Alex Smith doesn't have that high of a ceiling, even though he's been productive for the past 5 years. But the reason why I think he's a good stopgap quarterback, I do think that this is a weak year for quarterbacks in the draft.
Oh, yeah, no, that helps him, yeah.
Free agency class. I do think that he will be the perfect guy for teams looking for quarterbacks next year. Don't get me wrong, Deshaun Watson, Mitchell Trubisky,
right,
and Deshaun Kaiser, I do think they will be drafted, but I don't know if any of them will be a starter right away. I think the only rookie quarterback I can see probably starting is Deshaun Watson. But as far as Mitchell Trubisky and Deshaun Kaiser, I think they might sit out the first year, maybe 2 years. I do think that if Mike Glennon does go to the Bears or, a team like the Niners, which I think he's a great fit for both teams, I think he can be probably the starter for maybe 2 years, next year and then the year after in 2018, while we know the rookie quarterback is sitting on the bench. Or if Mike Glennon happens to struggle, then next year, and he can struggle in 2017 too, I do think that it gives kind of like a leeway of a team to have a stopgap quarterback, but also have a backup quarterback as well. I think that's something I'm trying to make. Like, that's the point I'm trying to make. That he's a good stopgap quarterback for maybe at least 1 to 2 years.
I mean, yeah, stopgap quarterback is good. It's just you're paying $15 million for a stopgap quarterback.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, that's way too high, too. I think that's way too high, but we have to be realistic here. That's probably the deal he's going to get.
That's fine, but also you can get someone like a Tyrod Taylor, who the Buffalo Bills don't seem to be key on at all. You get him for cheaper than that. You can get other players in the draft. I mean, even if you do a stopgap quarterback, Colin Kaepernick can be a stopgap quarterback.
Yeah,
there's a lot of people that can be a lot cheaper than that, because the thing is, that's what he's going to make. You kind of got to make peace with that. Okay, fine, but you don't have to do that if you're trying not to be a bad team. I mean, we talked about this last week. Like, one of the best parts of the Patriots, outside of the fact that, they have all these, talented players that seem to come out of nowhere, none of them are paid a lot. Right, you're talking about Adrian Peterson, and before Marshall signed, how they were thinking about taking a discount to sign with the Patriots, because of course you were going to take a discount to sign with the Patriots. The only time the Patriots have ever actually overspent for anybody was, Revis? And even that was he was really good, and he got a Super Bowl with it, and then after that he was like, okay, you want to restructure this again? Nope. Okay, I'm gone. That was a really quick, wham, bam, 1 year, then he's gone kind of thing. But they don't sign people for a lot of money, and they keep getting players over and over and over again who are good for cheap. So, yeah, Glennon's going to get a lot of money, but that doesn't mean it's going to be good for your team just because you have to pay him.
So we agree that Mike Glennon's going to get overpaid this year.
I mean, yeah.
It's okay. So we agree on that part. All right, moving on. I wanted to save this story for today because I wanted to talk about this with you, Anthony.
Sure.
It wouldn't have been fun to talk about by myself. But apparently, Arian Foster.
Arian.
Did I say Arian Foster again?
You keep combining.
Why do I keep saying that? Okay, Arian Foster. Okay, on Sunday night he spent 4 hours on Twitter explaining why he can take on a wolf 1-on-1. So you look at the whole timeline here. He said Arian Foster. I think he does MMA training on the side. So this is the whole timeline of Arian Foster on his Twitter taking on a wolf. Okay, this is what he tweeted. I honestly think I can get a wolf 1-on-1 though. And he says, I'm 230. Wolves are what? 180 to 200 tops. He has no thumbs. If I control his neck, he's donezo. And then Arian goes on and said, none of them have thumbs. I've studied the wolf. He can't read. I know his weaknesses, plus the thumb thing. If he bites me, his main weapon is immobilized. Then becomes vulnerable. This is why thumbs are so important. Thumb. I still have a whole other arm, my right one, because I used the non-dominant one to shield. I'm just smarter than the wolf. Advantage, me. So, Arian Foster was not done. He said, You think a wolf knows where my artery is? All of a sudden, I'm finding a wolf that knows biology? Elves do not have websites, aggression, arms, or thumbs. Just a walking meal. So, he goes on and on. Yeah. That's pretty much all I can say. He really thinks he can take on a wolf. And by the way, I don't think they weigh 180. I think they're a little bit lighter than that. I think can go up to, I think they weigh up less than 100. That's still pretty high for an animal, though. Like less than 100, and you're shaking your head.
Look, man. All right, here's the thing. To be fair to Foster, I heard him do an interview with Bomani Jones where he basically was just kind of walking it back a little bit and basically saying, kind of like not being as strident as he was on Twitter about this whole thing. And, all right, look, so I listened to this, the Dan Le Batard show, right? And every Tuesday at about 9 o'clock Pacific time, 12 Eastern, he has Ron McGill on, who is an animal expert. And, we talk about all these kind of things, any kind of animal, dogs, snakes, elephants, whatever animal you can think of. They talked about yesterday how basically giraffes, have you ever seen giraffes kind of like ram their necks at each other? If you've ever seen that happen, it's basically some kind of like a male dominance trying to get the woman kind of thing, right? That's how that goes. Yes, fine. You weigh more than a wolf. Congratulations for you. They are apex predators that will kill things, right? They're wolves, right? And talk about like, oh, well, if I'm in this, situation where, it's for my life, I'm going to be better at this and I'm going to be more, I'm going to hone my skills better and I'm going to be better prepared. Yeah, so is the wolf in the life or death situation, by the way. It's not just you.
That's what they do for a living.
That's how they live. Like, they survive. Like, it's not just a thing where it's just like, oh, I'm going to go to the store. No, they just survive on food that they find, man. Like, that's how this goes for a wolf. And also, you have opposable thumbs. Congratulations. Now what if it bites that thumb? Now you have no thumb. Now you just have the 4 fingers and your arteries are severed and it's bad, right?
You turn into Jason Pierre-Paul without a thumb.
Dude, yeah, it's hard, man. Like, the wolves, like, if they bite your arm, forget about the thumb. If they bite your arm, if they bite your leg, if they bite your chest, if they bite anything, man, it's not like they're biting it like a cat does and it kind of like bites and, retracts kind of thing. Like, it will bite and it will latch onto you. Like, it will sever arteries, tendons, everything that you got in your damn arm that makes it really hard for you to grab anything. And at that point, if you don't have full force of your arm, right? If you don't have the full strength in your arm, you're not going to be able to snap the wolf's neck. You're not going to be able to take it down. You're not going to be able to do anything. I don't care how many times you saw The Grey and you saw Liam Neeson take down these wolves. That's not the same thing, man. Like, it's a wolf. Like, wolf. I don't understand. Like, I
seriously think Liam Neeson can take on a wolf.
That's fine. Liam Neeson's also like 6'7". He's a giant man.
Yeah.
But I don't like. I get he was joking, and he was even saying like, I'm not saying that I can take down like the number 1 wolf. I'm going to take down kind of like the lower end wolf. Okay, fine. Also, wolf. Like,
they're not going to be all nice. No, they're wild animals. That's what they do. And apparently, there's something called the International Wolf Center, and they responded to Foster's statements with a press release basically calling him crazy that he can take on a wolf. And this is what it says. He's weighing in at 230 pounds. Arian certainly would have the wolf beat in size, but that may not be his advantage. North American gray wolves typically weigh a lot less, typically around 65 to 130 pounds, and it is common that they are significantly smaller than their prey. That said, an experienced wolf can kill a half-ton bison or musk ox all by itself, although in the wild, wolves more typically hunt as a pack.
Yep.
And then, the statement goes on to Arian's point. Wolves do not have thumbs, nor do they not need them. Wolves use incredible upper body features and strength to take down the prey. Their bite is intense and crippling. They crack the bones of their prey and have powerful muscles in their neck to take down and disable animals that can be 5 to 10 times their size or more. This is where Arian's theory of being able to go after him by the neck would most likely not likely work.
So you understand that every kind of mammal or animal has some sort of evolutionary advantage, right? There's a reason why these things still exist. For us, it's more of our brain and our opposable thumbs to do stuff, right? So I get the opposable thumb thing with Foster. Woodpeckers have something in their brain because you always, you see woodpeckers pecking the heck out of a piece of wood. Well, why don't they get concussions? Well, it's because the way their brain and their skull structure works, basically, is a barrier so that way they don't get concussions all the time. Same thing with the giraffes, with the necks. They have stuff built in. Vultures, basically, because they're eating, dead carcasses all the time, they have antibodies in them that basically, if we did that same thing, we would die because our bodies can't handle it, but they can because they've been doing it for years. The wolf is a pack animal, and it has stuff, like they said, in them to where they can get attacked in certain places. They're not going to be as vulnerable as other people are. Evolution is a thing. That's why we can adapt, and that's why we're still here, and that's why other animals are still here to this day. They are used to fighting. We are not. We are used to MMA fighting where we punch with gloves. They are used to scratching and clawing until the other person dies.
That's a good way to put it. All right, well, that is your biology lesson today, guys. I don't know what we would categorize that, but I'll consider it biology, something like that. So that's your lesson today. Arian Foster is crazy. Think he can take on a wolf. I actually laughed when I heard about this. He literally spent hours discussing why. He was dead serious, too.
And we spent about 10 minutes on it.
That's fine. This is why I saved it for today.
That's fine. I got you.
This is fine. We saved it for today. But that's going to conclude our show. I think it's best that we end on that note. We will be back tomorrow. We might get into some free agent deals that could happen. Because remember, it does start tomorrow, guys. So we're in for a couple of busy days here. And we will discuss any type of news that happens over the next 24 hours. As always, I'm Jeremiah.
And I'm Anthony.
And I'd like to thank you guys for tuning in to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast. You guys have a great day.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.